Hello Internet, and welcome to the Collective Arcana. We're a channel all about tabletop gaming, and today I'm going to talk, I'm actually going to be sort of correcting an earlier video that I did on the Champion. Right when Pathfinder 2nd Edition came out, I had just read through, and you can go watch it, and you can listen to that guy, but he's 3 months or 4 months stupider than I am, so I definitely have some new insights that I would like to share with you. So let's sort of jump in. A lot of what I said in that video, again, I hadn't really played the game yet. I certainly hadn't actually played, in fact. But yeah, I'd done a lot of reading and watching videos, but I was really coming from a first edition Pathfinder bias. So after having a champion in both my online game and my in-person game that I play, that I run, I've got definitely a better idea of how that class both measures up to what it used to do and fits into a party. So let me first start with a little disclaimer. Both of my champions are now no longer playing champions, and that's something to consider and to think about. One of them left for the moral code reasons, and he will be, I think, much more happy with his rogue that he's about to be. And it wasn't necessarily that he had any problems with the mechanics. In fact, he really felt like he, had some new options that he didn't have before. It was just he really wanted to be able to indiscriminately murder bad guys and not have to spare them just because they surrendered. So that's why he left, but that wasn't a mechanical reason. The reason that my online player left was sort of a mechanical reason, and it's because primarily I think the second edition just doesn't quite support the strangeness of his build. Right now the champion, and I'm going to get into all the reasons why I like it a lot better than I did before, but it's still pretty bare bones in terms of the options that it gives you. It's still really wanting to sort of hold you into certainly a melee role. Not that you can't, pick up a bow or multi-class and get some other options, but in terms of what's on offer in the class right now, there's almost nothing to give you any sort of an edge in ranged combat. Even if you go out of your way and pick up some of the stranger focus spells, you're still not going to compare to a character that is dedicated to range, and you're not going to be able to create a character just from the champion that is really dedicated to range. Is that okay? Sure. But it was a problem for my player. So he actually ended up finding a home for himself in the Ranger, multi-classed into both Champion and Cleric. He's actually got very few Ranger feats. I believe all he really does like a Ranger is Hunt Prey and Flurry. But coming from a Gunslinger Paladin build in first edition, he really liked the ways, because I've mentioned before, we were using the Unchained Action economy, which is very similar to the current second edition 3-action economy. It's the precursor to that. It's a lot rougher around the edges because it wasn't, the game wasn't created with that system in mind. But it tacks on really well, and if you're still playing first edition and haven't checked that out, you really, really should. But he really liked the way that he was able to spread out his turns and felt like he had a lot of options where, as far as his shooting goes, he really very diminishing returns with the way that he used to play. And he could have, and we talked about him changing his build and the way that he wanted to interact in combat and with the world. And that led him to, for a while thinking about being a cleric, but that just wasn't combat enough. It didn't fit the character. The spells interested him, but he just could not justify giving up the better attack and the more martial feel. Even with the War Priest, it's just not quite what the champion does. But he just wanted something that was pretty martial focused, and in the end he decided that the better chance to hit multiple times in a round was more appealing to him than all the increased defenses that the champion gets by default, and the initiative boost and things like that. Pretty good bonuses for him as well. So does that mean that the champion is inherently bad? No, it just means that the champion doesn't yet have all the tools that it needs to make as well-rounded characters as some of the other classes. You look at a fighter, which can build myriad different fighting styles. Barbarian that can at least has support for dual wielding, or the preferred, clearly, big gigantic weapons. And then you have even the ranger, which gets options for ranged or dual wielding. The champion has really only got support for a one-handed weapon and a shield. It doesn't really get much for a larger, heavier weapon or dual wielding. And you don't have to use a shield, but you're going to find yourself with more and more limited options as you go if you do not use the more traditional method. And so I want to just say, first of all, that I believe we're going to get hopefully some of that fixed with the Advanced Player's Guide. I definitely think they've given themselves a lot of room to grow with the champion. The fact that you can choose to have your primary ability score be dexterity when you select the class is pretty telling, considering how few dexterous feeling options they have. I do think that they wanted to leave themselves some space there. And certainly we know in the Advanced Player's Guide that we're going to get a few options for archery. We know there's at least going to be a regular archer, a Zen archer, and some sort of an eldritch or magical archer. Whether we get something else, I don't know. No word. I don't think we're going to be getting the gunslinger, which is unfortunate. I'm sure they're saving that for their next big book. But I think that those options alone will be enough to certainly create some alternative looking champions. Is it as good as getting in-class support? No, certainly not. But with the the evil paladin, the anti-paladin type options coming in the Advanced Player's Guide, I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more offensive options come to the champion with that book. I mean, I personally don't necessarily think of a shield when I think of an evil paladin. I certainly don't think of them as the defenders of their group, focused on reducing damage to themselves and allies the way that the good aligned champions are. So I'm hoping we'll see some options there. But I really sort of want to, now that we've got all that out of the way, I really sort of want to talk about my impressions of the class and their ability to be, I think the thing that I kept coming back to in that video was their ability to put the fear of God into an enemy, especially an evil enemy. And I've got to say, I think they certainly can. At the time, the numbers didn't look that impressive because I'm thinking of first edition numbers, and I'm not factoring in the improved way that the action economy works, the real huge benefit of having so many fantastic reactions. Since getting into the game and switching both of my games over, to me, reactions are the most interesting parts of a character, and champions not only get a couple of reactions that other classes either can't have access to or have limited access to, they also have the ability to do those reactions multiple times in one round, which, for those of you that miss the swashbuckler and things that got lots of attacks of opportunity and things like that, it's a very big deal in second edition. Not a lot of classes can ever get multiple reactions out in a round, and it's possible with a champion to get 3. Now they can't all 3 be the same type, but any 2 of those could be the same type. It's definitely a game changer once you realize how that translates. And beyond just those reactions, there's quite a few ways, and I sort of did realize that when I was doing that video, but there's really several ways to add just little bits of damage that can really, really add up. So I just, I did a quick little build on Path Builder, and if you do not have Path Builder, I recommend you get it if you have an Android device that supports it. It's not on other devices yet, but hey, listen, if you're watching this and you have the ability to leave me a comment down there for me and the other viewers, we would really appreciate if you have recommendations for people that do not have Android devices and don't have access to the wonderful application that is Path Builder 2e. Especially converting everything over, just being able to tell my players, hey, download this thing and build your character and just walk them through a little bit of it and then let them go, was very, very helpful. But anyway, so I built a character on Path Builder, a champion, and full disclosure, I did not build this as a particularly defensive character, but I'm going to put a little asterisk on that and come back to that. So I missed out on some of what I consider to be really default Paladin things, and I sort of talked about really being bummed out about not having them. But in a little bit, we'll get to why I don't feel quite the same way about that I used to. But so with stacking a few abilities, I mean, you get weapon specialization, which a lot of, especially martial, I think almost every class actually gets it just at different stages and some very late in the game. But you get weapon specialization, which is a flat increase to damage. So if you have a good-sized weapon, again, not a lot of feat support for it, but it's still pretty strong with or without feats. Get one of the weapons that has a larger damage die when held in two hands, for example. Like a bastard sword could be very good. But then you also have the weapon specialization, so you get your strength bonus, you get a small little flat bonus. And that increases. It starts at, I've got numbers here, starts at 3, then it goes to 6. And that's nice. So there's not a lot of ways in this game to get flat damage, and so that's why everybody gets specialization, sort of. But beyond that, you also get Smite Evil, which is an extra chunk of damage as long as the target's evil. But you combine that specialization with the Oaths, which are, Shining for undead, Fiend's Bane for demonic, and Dragon Slayer for dragons. And you don't need all of those. You might be able to tell early on what kind of campaign you're having. Most campaigns are going to feature at least one of those pretty heavily. I will say that of the 3, the Dragon Slayer Oath, unless you're playing a particularly dragon-heavy campaign, is probably the least common one to be useful, but simply because you don't fight a lot of fodder dragons, where you might fight a lot of fodder demons or undead. So you might have 5 or 6 really big punctuation mark dragons that you fight throughout a campaign, and that's honestly probably a lot. But you could have an entire arc that lasts several levels where you're just mowing through undead or demons. And they certainly make up pretty big chunks of the player's handbook as well, or the core rulebook, I should say. So Dragon Slayer might be the weakest unless you're in a dragon-heavy campaign. But those give you some nice damage boosts, and now they only apply to if you have Retributive Strike. But if you're building an offensive, put the fear of God into bad guys type of character, you probably want Retribution, which is the lawful, I believe. Is it? Yeah, it is. Sorry, there's a lot of names have changed, and it's hard to keep it straight sometimes. But so what you're going to do there is, you're going to notice a little bit of additive damage. But then you're going to get abilities as you level up. Beginning at level 6, you can get Smite Evil, which allows you to add a little bit of extra good damage to attacks against creatures that are evil or who have attacked allies. And what's good about that is it takes an action to put it on, but as long as that thing keeps attacking your allies, it will stay up. So, assuming that it's a big demon that's hurting everybody, as they do, or a dragon, breathing area effect, breath attacks, there's a good chance you're going to be able to get more than one round out of that pretty easily before you have to re-up it. There's no real limit to re-upping it. Level 12, you get Blade of Justice, which takes 2 actions, but part of that includes a strike action. So what that means is that you still have 1 action remaining, which is great, but it means you can set up with a smite, and then which sets up your next strike, which would include the Blade of Justice strike, and thus add on all that damage. Now what's cool about Blade of Justice is you get a couple of extra weapon damage dice, which is nothing to scoff at. If you already have a couple of weapon damage dice, which by level 12 you probably should, you're going to be looking at anywhere between 4 and up to 6 damage, just base weapon dice. If those are D12s, that is a pretty tough attack. And then on top of that, you are going to get to add everything that happens when you do a retributive strike. So that's going to be, you're going to add some damage from one of those oaths, the Fiend's Bane and things like that, which I think is up to 7 maybe. By 12th level, it's definitely at 4 or 7. And then, your specialization, of course, is on there. Your Smite Evil is on there. You're going to add that persistent charisma damage. Plus, if you chose a weapon as your bonded ally, then you're going to probably have Holy, and then depending on your feat loadout, you might have any number of other damage boosting things. So you could have some special magical dice from those property runes. You could have up to 6 weapon dice, and then with all the other bonuses, you're going to be adding somewhere in the neighborhood of about 18 to 24 additional damage on top of at least 6d12. To put that in perspective, now that's a lot that happened to get there. Certainly. But in terms of first edition, a champion striking a 20th level paladin might get to add 40 damage on a smite. A lot of other effects, sure. But 40 damage, while a lot of damage, 6d12 plus 24 is probably going to beat that on average. And it's a lot to get there. And I'm not saying that we don't need more offensive options. We definitely do. But I think just, with the core book here, you can get a pretty smitey feeling champion. A lot more than I initially gave it credit for. Something that can absolutely just show up and start obliterating foes. And now some of you might be saying, well, yeah, but sounds like you spent a lot of your build getting there. And I did. But I talked about earlier about that asterisk when I said that I missed a lot of the more defensive champion things. What I'm going to say is the champion by default, your defenses and your saves are some of the highest baseline of any class in the game in 2nd edition. And I can say pretty confidently that neither of my champions were in the habit of failing saves, except ones that were set so high that other members of the party not just also failed them, but would have had difficulty making them even if they rolled extremely well. Just a couple of times when I really upset them testing out some powerful enemies as we were gauging some of the different encounter levels in the system. Your defenses are very strong by default. It sucks to not have the immunity to fear. That is a real bummer, but the way that fear works now, you can take a moment to compose yourself. You can be and just let that sort of wear down as you do things that don't have you relying on dice rolls for a couple of moments. And if that's not heroic enough for you, you have plenty of ways beyond just being a champion and taking those champion feats to improve that. You could be several ancestries give you an option to limited use or as a reaction to increase a saving throw or reduce it. And since most of the save boosting things for the champion required a reaction anyway, it's really sort of a wash in terms of cost there. So for that reason, I don't really think that you're losing a whole lot by not having those saves, because you already have very high saves by default. Wisdom is, a great stat for everybody, and you're likely to have a high fortitude. The reflex might drop you, but again, you could be a dex-based champion without taking really much. I mean, you can have the kind of unarmored defense that would normally be relegated to a monk. So a lot to consider there, and a lot to unpack, and a lot of potential. But I do hope that we see in the next couple of books, and I'm going to have a review here shortly of the Gods and Magic. I don't have my hands on it just yet, shipping being what it is, but I don't think we're going to get a whole lot of support for champions in there from what I've been able to glean on the forums and from the interviews. It seems like it's much more focused on clerics and then giving non-divine classes options. But I do expect we're going to see some fun things with the Advanced Player's Guide. If nothing else, we're going to see a lot of archetypes that can just be tacked on to a champion to expand the play style that you might choose. So that's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover in the video. I've been feeling really bad lately about how harsh I was on the champion. I have really seen what the class can do. And again, like I said, it's very odd that no one has stuck around, but one guy was completely because of the alignment and behavioral restrictions, not the class, and the other guy was definitely just because there's not a lot of ranged support for the champion yet. So I do hope that we see that. I do appreciate you sticking around, and my poor wife has to edit this video, and I'm very, very sorry for her, because I made it very difficult for her. But thanks a lot. If there's anything else you guys want to see, definitely let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that. We really appreciate it. And thanks for coming by. Welcome to the Collective.